see the robot and asking if it's okay to be recorded. So what this session is we have a group called Graduate and Postdoctoral Success. And so what I try to do is figure out ways to help graduate students and postdocs, and anyone else who would like to crash the party, pick up some soft skills. And then today, I think we're going to be talking a little bit about hard skills, even though it's kind of dabbling. So I wanted to invite Willie Schaefer in because, and to tell you the truth, I don't really remember. Oh, you were going to help me with a poster session. So you pointed me the way to Adobe Creative Cloud to figure out how to house some posters. So that's how I was originally introduced to you. So he has helped me expand my world in how to do some digital literacy and how to play with some tools. So I wanted to invite him in because he is the, I believe it's the Adobe Creative Cloud Specialist.
Join the meeting.
And in fact, we are a Creative Cloud campus, and I'm sure you can tell us a little bit about that. So before I step on his toes too much, I'm going to turn it over to Willie because he is the guru that will be leading you.
Well, thank you so much for that. And guru, maybe a strong word, but yes, I have used Adobe for a long time. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm really excited to give you guys an overview of this badge today. So what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about some of the big picture things that I want you to gain as you go through this session, some of the things we're going to be looking at, and some of the reasons that we are doing these different things and what is really interesting about it. So we're going to switch back and forth between a presentation today and me speaking. Don't worry, I'm not going to be one of those people who hides behind the presentation the whole time. So I will be on screen as much as possible. So let me share my screen. As I say that, I'm going to share my screen now, and let me get the presentation up for you. I apologize. It just decided to kick me out for a second. Let's try that one more time. There we go. It did one of those things where it suddenly was like, oh, that's where you logged in. Let's take a look at that, not your screen. All right. So every time I do one of these sessions, whenever I'm talking to somebody, I always like to start with a quote because I always like to think about what other folks say, not necessarily just, what I think, because there's a lot of things that I think and I think are important, but I always want to see what other people think is important as well. And here we have a quote that says, "The digital revolution is far more significant than the invention of writing or even printing." And this comes from Douglas Engelbart, who is an inventor and kind of one of the pioneers of the internet. And I think that this is so relevant to what we're talking about because we are all trained. We are all given these abilities to write and create content, but a lot of us are never trained to make the digital components of that content. We're taught how to use Word, but not how to add visual elements to Word, not what looks good and not what might be appealing to someone else outside of the written word. And again, we're trained so well on how to write. We have our writing looked at and scrutinized and pored over for years and years and years. And then when it's visual, it's like, oh, just slap a picture from Google on it. That'll make it good, right? That's what's going to make our piece wonderful here. But we really need to think about that more because we are in a digital world now. We are in a very visual world now. And these badges are really going to talk to that. And today I'm just going to speak through some of the details of that, get you kind of warmed up to the idea. So let me go back to my presentation here and go down. A little bit about me. My name is Willie Schaefer. I am the Adobe specialist here. I've been working in art and design for 25 years. I have 25 years of freelance experience. I started right around the boom of the internet doing websites for bands and DJs and stuff like that. It was one of those things where I was still in high school and I was kind of that typical high schooler who believed he knew everything. And I reached out to a website and I just said, "Your website is terrible. I could do better." And I got a freelance gig from it. And that sort of started things. I've been using Adobe for 21 years. I used some other software prior to that. And I've been working in education for 19 of those years. So I've done a little bit of everything when it comes to Adobe. I've been a graphic designer a marketing manager, a videographer, a video editor, a copywriter, a web designer, assistant professor, instructional designer, and Adobe specialist now. So, you know, it's one of those things where I've kind of hit a lot of different applications of these tools. And one of the wonderful things that this experience has provided to me is the ability to sit in with a number of search committees, with reviews for student applicants for different things, with reviews for presentations. I've seen a lot of different materials come across my desk during this time. And what I'm hoping with what we're talking about today and in the badges, that it will give you a better opportunity to do what you want to do, whether it be to get that job or to do that presentation or to move to another institution. These skills, everything I talk about is to do that. Real world skills that will make you ready. That's what I'm all about. And if you haven't noticed, I talk with my hands a lot. So hopefully you guys don't mind that too much. All right, so a little bit about Adobe before we get too deep. It started in the early 80s. It was one of those things where all those tech startups were coming up, and Adobe started up in the early 80s. 89, they said they were going to launch Photoshop, which is what, when it's still to this day, when I talk to people about Adobe, they're like, oh, so you're a Photoshop guy, right? And I'm like, well, there is Photoshop, but there's a lot more to that. Because Adobe Photoshop really got used heavily in the early 90s. So there's what are we looking at now? If that's the 90s, we're looking at 30 years that this software has been around. So whenever I talk to people about technology, they're like, oh, well, I learned that technology and now it's not relevant anymore. And I wasted my time because I learned this skill. It's no longer applicable. Well, with Adobe, when you learn these skills, they're going to be around for a while. This software is not going away. It's getting bigger and more widely used. So do realize that it's not one of those skills that you're like, oh, well, I wasted my time learning this. In the past, it was always used for design work. As I said, graphic design, videography, those things, those positions that I've held were the prime interests for it. But now it's bridging and it's going further, and it's sort of going on between the typical use of, oh, well, I use Adobe because I'm a graphic designer and I make advertisements. Well, that's not always the case. It's no longer a situation where it's just the graphic designer making advertisements. I see this all the time. And I believe I even mentioned this in one of the badge videos where I was working with someone who was going into nonprofit fundraising. And the job requirements stated that they needed to know Photoshop and Illustrator. It's not just for designers anymore. People across the board need these skills. And even if you're going to a field, you're like, well, I'm going into history. There's no need for me to have this. Well, these are skills that you can use to make yourself more marketable. And I'll give an example now about a committee that I sat in on, and it wasn't for history, it was for another major. And the person who was interviewing for the position was one of two very qualified candidates. And it was, very good people, very, their resumes and CVs were awesome. But this user had been creating videos on YouTube, or this applicant, not user, this applicant had been creating videos on YouTube and had a following on YouTube and had shown this very technical skill very easily through making videos, nothing related to video making, but he showed that skill set through video. He used that software. His field was nothing to do with video production. But we looked at that as a committee and we're like, we're hiring this person because he can show his students how to do this. And this was pre-pandemic. And I can imagine he's doing very well now during the pandemic because he already had those skills in how to produce video content. So really just something to think about. It doesn't necessarily, the use of it and the software that you use may seem far outside of what you do, but it is very applicable. Oh, going back, it was mentioned earlier that we are an Adobe Creative Campus, and this is a phenomenal opportunity. This is quite honestly what brought me to UTSA. I was working for another institution, and I found out about the Creative Campus program through the OLC conference. And I went back to my campus and I said, oh, I'm so excited about this. I want us to be a creative campus. And my other campus wasn't chosen. UTSA was. UTSA is one of 43 campuses in the entire world that is a creative campus. And recently I found out of those 43, only 5 of them are Hispanic serving institutions, and UTSA is one of only 5 Hispanic serving institutions that's also a creative campus. So it's a very unique thing to be part of. And what does it mean? Well, it means that Adobe is here for us. Just today, I was meeting with an Adobe rep and working with them. I see a question, if we didn't have access through UTSA, how much would we have to pay to be able to use all the tools? And ballpark, I know it's a monthly fee. I've not looked at the monthly fee recently. In the past, when I used it, it was a situation where you had to buy the software. It would come out every 18 months. And just to give you a kind of figure of that, as I worked a second job so I could afford the software. Now, I do know that there are typically discounts, but as a student, you know, it's another expense. And since we are a creative campus and it's free, we don't have other expenses. You know, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to work a second job so you can afford a creative campus. That's not something that you're going to have to be concerned with. So it really does give you a lot of tools that you can use and take advantage of to fill that CV, to fill that resume with new things. Now, with that, you know, it is really important to also know that it is free for you as long as you are registered for courses. So do remember that. If you don't register for courses, you will lose access. When you finish, you can use, they have a transfer tool where if you continue the subscription after you graduate, that you can transfer your material into your new subscription. So it's not like you lose it or anything like that. And I'm trying to see if I can work out something for alumni right now, but it's been a very big process. So I'm waiting on some news from Adobe on that. Logging in is really incredibly easy. And I'm going to mention this really briefly because I don't go into it in detail on the badges, but all you have to do, and I'll put this up in the chat, let me bring the chat window open, is go to creativecloud.adobe.com. And if you go to creativecloud.adobe.com, it will take you to this site right here. Now I'm logged in already because I had to be logged in to show my presentation because my presentation's through Adobe software. But you'll see an option right up here in the corner to sign in. And that will allow you to sign in. It will ask you for your UTSA email address. And then once you use your UTSA email address, it will ask you for your ABC123 and passphrase. And that's all you have to do to log in. So really easy. One thing I always tell people just to be careful with this is a lot of people will try to put in their Gmail address or some other email account. And if you do that, it will give you a trial of the software, but it won't give you the full access to the software. So if you're ever getting it and you come in and it says, oh, your trial is going to be done in 15 days, make sure you're using your UTSA account. Just a really easy thing to do. Once you're in, you can go up here to apps, and that will allow you to select the app that you want to install. Now, for me, you can see that I've installed all these apps, and so it's just giving me the option to open them. But if we scroll down, this is what it will look like for you, where it says install or learn more. So if you're not sure what it does, you can select learn more, and it will give you overview, key features, and tutorials, all that wonderful stuff right there. And then it'll allow you to install that tool. Now, if you have installed the tool and you're like, oh, wait, this is a really cool tool. What do I do with it again? You can also get tutorials by selecting the 3 dots here and selecting learn more. And this will give you further tutorials. So if you're going through the badge and you're like, I want to learn something a little bit more than what's covered in the badge, I try to cover all the skills you'll need. But if you want to go beyond those skills, then you can come in here and learn those skills. And that's available again to you both on Adobe or on creativecloud.adobe.com. And once you've installed an app, you will also get the Creative Cloud desktop app, which gives you the same options here. And this is just an app that'll run on your computer that allows you to install these things. Now, there are also Adobe mobile apps that will work on your phone, work on your tablet, things like that. And some of the badges will talk about those. But if you're using Android or iOS, very easy to get from the App Store, no challenges. You log in the same way with your UTSA information. And there's one other app that logs in a little bit differently, but we're going to talk about that in a moment, so don't worry too much about that. All right. And just a reminder, if anyone has any questions throughout this session, hold them. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, and I will be more than willing to go into further detail. So just make a note of any questions you have, and I'll be sure to answer those for you. All right, so the first badge, or I'm sorry, before we get to the first badge, we're talking about digital literacy. I got ahead of myself there, I apologize. And I'm gonna give you a definition of what it says about digital literacy, and I'm gonna read this. I don't typically read off of cue cards, but I'm gonna do that right now because I wanna get that definition right. Digital literacy refers to an individual's ability to find, evaluate, and compose clear information through writing and other media on various digital platforms. Digital literacy is evaluated by an individual's grammar, composition, typing skills, and the ability to produce text, images, audio, and designs using technology. So it's exactly what I was talking about earlier, is that we have all these writing skills, right? But digital literacy is combining those with the ability to create visuals, to create audio, to create some other content that makes our writing more powerful, that it makes it more impactful to the person looking at it, because it's a visual world, and we want to make sure that folks can understand what we're saying, and a visual makes that so much more powerful than our writing alone. As I said before, we've had our writing critiqued and critiqued and critiqued. As a design professor for years, I critiqued and critiqued and critiqued design work, but I would say a vast majority of us have never had our visual content really broken down and looked at and assessed. So this is something that I want you to do. Now, I can't sit here and give you the feedback that I would give to a design student, but I want you to look, to be open to what other people are doing. Start looking at the world around you. Watch commercials. I know that sounds weird, but watch commercials and see how they're selling things to you. Look at advertisements and see how they're selling to you, because what you need to do is the same thing with what you're writing and with yourself. You need to be able to sell whatever you have that you want to talk about. All right, let me share my screen one more time. Come on, share screen. There we go. So it's really important that we do that. And we really want to make sure we are implementing this across all platforms. And what that means is that we have a strong presence in a print piece, in a video piece, in audio, online, that if anyone sees that they get us, that they see us and what we're doing as a brand. So just like if you look at Nike, you know what Nike's brand looks like. You see Coke, you know what Coke's brand looks like. I can tell you right now, I can say Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, that was hard to say. Actually, I can't say Coca-Cola. I can say Coca-Cola, and you instantly have a red color in your head, maybe the font in your head, because their visuals are so strong. And this is what you need to have for yourself, as well as you're selling yourself and putting your ideas out there, is a strong visual identity. And that's part of what this badge is going to help with. And now we're going to get to the first badge that I jumped ahead of earlier and try to start talking about because I'm excited about it. And we're going to talk a little bit about filming yourself on a budget. And this is one of those things that people are always like, a lot of times people think traditional. When they start thinking about videoing, they think about movies and movie equipment and at the expense of it. And we need big lighting kits and we need expensive cameras and all of the technology that we need. Recently, I was watching Back to the Future with my son. He's 7 years old. He had never seen it before. And I saw the part where they're talking about, oh, no wonder your president is an actor. You have a camera that's a film studio that's this small. And it was a giant, 1980s camera. And I'm like, I have a camera that's this small that I have with me at all times. And I can film with this, in a quality that there have been commercials that have been filmed with phones. It's kind of to prove how great the phone is, but there are things that have been filmed with a phone. And with this, my phone's like 2 years old and it films at a quality that is fine for most visual presentations. Now, I always say this with a caveat of if you still have a flip phone, you probably don't want to use that to film. But if you're using a somewhat modern phone, then you have your camera already. You don't need a camera. You don't really need lighting, because in the badge, I'm going to get into this, where how we use our natural lighting to work for us. I have always been in education, and always as an educator, there's no budget. It's always been that situation. Now, I've done design work where I've had bigger budgets and had money and equipment, but whenever I've done things for education, it's like, oh yeah, here's 2 cents, go make your, whatever you need to make. And so I've learned ways that you can do things with a little bit of nothing. And I'm going to show that to you. Now, there are a couple of pieces of equipment I do recommend, but those things are available to you very cheaply on Amazon. And if you don't like Amazon, I know some people aren't pro Amazon, that's okay. But you can find this equipment through other places very cheaply. The things I do recommend, and I get into this more into the badge, is that you do have a microphone of some sort, because that is one weakness of the phone, is that the microphone quality generally isn't that good. And that you may want to consider, as much as I say you don't need big lighting, you may want to think about a ring light or something to put your camera on, like a tripod. The wonderful thing about that is the death of the selfie stick. Remember a couple of years ago when everybody had a selfie stick and they were everywhere and you couldn't get away from them? Well, the great thing is about that is companies are like, oh, the selfie stick is going to be here forever. And they produce a ton of them and they're super cheap now. And most of them have the ability to turn into a tripod for your phone. And that's what I use. And I think mine cost me like $10. That's it. And I'm not gonna lie, it's awesome. It's a great tool. I use it all the time to take selfies. No, to produce video content because it just makes my life a lot easier. And it's one of those things where I don't need a big expensive tripod. I don't need to go out there and spend $100, $150 on a tripod, because I have my $10 one that does the same thing. In this badge, we're going to talk about Premiere Rush. And Premiere Rush is a tool, a wonderful tool from Adobe. I will be honest with you, it's a tool that I've started using really in the last year, since the start of the pandemic. Because Premiere Rush is kind of a little sister or little brother program to Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro is the kind of one of those granddaddy pieces of software that has been used forever, and you see big video, like films are made with it, commercials are made with it. It's a very professional tool. And with it, it's very complex. Rush is not complex. It's a tool that you can jump into easily, use easily. It's not complicated, it's not deep, and it allows you to very quickly produce video content. It's a situation where when I would teach Premiere, I used to teach it as an entire course. It would take me a semester to teach the basics of editing for Premiere Pro. With Premiere Rush, I can teach it to somebody in about an hour. It's not that difficult. It's really easy to learn and get accustomed to. And one of the other things I love about it is if you get into video editing and you say, oh, wow, I really like this, I want to do more, you can import your Rush files into Premiere Pro and make them even better. So it's just a phenomenal tool to use. And with this, one of the things that you'll need to do is be able to share video. And I don't get too much into this, in the badge, but going back to what I said earlier, make a YouTube account. Everybody should have a YouTube account. You should have something out there, even if it's just you messing around and playing around, put it out there. If you find something that hits, I always like to think about that Ryan's toy review kid. Again, I have a 7-year-old, so he watches a lot of YouTube. And that kid made millions of dollars off of making YouTube videos where he plays with toys. There are all these little things. There might be something I was mentioning before the session about how I like watching videos about people repairing Hot Wheels cars. There's a million different videos out there. Why not make yours? I have a YouTube channel in my head that I've been meaning to make. I just don't have time to make it. And maybe one day I'll make my YouTube channel and I can retire and be a YouTube millionaire. But I always say, put your work out there, let people see it. The next thing is talking about a headshot with a phone. And guess what? Hey, we already talked about our piece of technology, which is our phone. Well, we're going to be using that same piece of technology again. And people come to me, I was doing another session similar to this one, and someone was like, oh, well, headshot is for an actor. That's not for a professional. I don't need a headshot. And I'm like, well, yes, a headshot could be for an actor or an actress. That's totally fine. But again, it's a situation where our visual identity is out there. Have you ever been to a conference where they have a presenter and there's a picture of the presenter at the conference? You want to publish a book. Hey, guess what? You might want a picture for that book. Oh, do you have a social media account? Well, guess what? You probably need a nice professional picture for it. So with that, in the past, it was always a situation where you have to go out and hire somebody to do this for you. You had to go to a photo studio, pay money, or you had to trust that your brother's cousin's uncle who says he's a photographer is going to take a good photo of you. And 9 times out of 10, I'm sorry, they're not a photographer. They just have a cool camera. And so what this does is this gives you power. This gives you power. This allows you to save your money so you're not spending it for someone else to take your shot and then you end up not liking it. This gives you the ability to take a photo of yourself. And I always do say, I do say with this, probably shouldn't be a selfie. If you have a friend who is steady, not shaky, have them take the photo for you. Because we want it, the key here is that it is a nice, clear photo. From there, we can edit in Photoshop. And that's what this badge is going to really talk about, is taking that kind of cell phone snap and making it look professional. Now, with this, again, flip phone, not so much going to work for you. The other thing, what I said about having someone who has a steady hand, I drink way too much coffee. And from it, I'm not the most steady person necessarily. So it's a situation where you want to find someone who's going to get that clean shot. And if you're like me and you drink a lot of coffee, you probably don't want to shoot that photo yourself. All right. So let's get back over here. Again, Photoshop, this is what we're using on it. Hey, so we're using one of those key tools, that tool I talk about, that tool that's been around since 1989. It's been around. It's one of those Adobe tools that will never go away. It's a skill set that will never go away. It's so important. Even if you don't end up using this in your career, you'll end up using this for fun. Adobe is fun. I like to joke, and sometimes I wonder how much of a joke it really is that I spend more time with Photoshop than I do with real people, because I love Photoshop. It's what I create my artwork in. It's what I edit in. I just love using it. It's a phenomenal tool. And I'll give you another example of how these skills can save you money. A couple of years back, I got a cool freelance gig where a author contacted me and he said, hey, I'm publishing a book about rights of people who were squatters in Brazil in the 1960s, if I remember correctly. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's a really cool book. Why are you contacting me? And it was because he had these wonderful photos that he shot. He was actually there during when everything was going on. But over the years, the photos had gotten destroyed, beaten up. And he hired me to correct those photos for him. So if you're ever making published content, you can correct your photos, so you don't have to pay someone like me to come in and correct them. Now, if you ever need to hire someone like me, do it yourself, save yourself money, learn these skills. They're really good for you as you go through and create content. Next thing on here is cleaning up your online presence. And this is something that is so very important. It is seriously one of the most important things in the world. And I see a comment in here, I've been using Adobe Spark this semester for a class. Has been great, 1,000 times better than Microsoft Publisher. Yes, Spark is a wonderful tool. I love it. It's a great stepping stone into Adobe. And I see so many people using it. And that's what my presentation today is, in Spark. I'm not a PowerPoint user. I put everything in Spark now. So it's a situation where I have, the film, I'm assuming the film is about the book that was published. So if that's a comment about that book that was published, yes, that was a very rough story for that. So, but getting back to online presence, we think about how important it is in the process of putting yourself out there. And I don't remember if I mentioned this in the badge, but this is such an important story to me. This is something, it just really strikes me. I think about it almost every single time I post something online. And I was working for another institution. We had a top candidate, very qualified, wonderful work experience, interviewed well. And so what do? We look at her online presence. We start looking at that online presence, and one of the things that was out there publicly for the world to see was a very political post. And I won't say which way political it was, but I will say it was against the institution's kind of beliefs. The institution had very strong guiding goals, and it was very far against those. That resume went from being a top candidate to going in the garbage. It went from one post, one social media post, and my arm hair is standing up on my arm right now, just thinking about this. One post destroyed this person's chances at a job, which could have been their dream job. I don't know if it was their dream job or not, but it could destroy your chances. So this is so very important, to make sure you have a good online presence. So that's why I wanted to make sure this was part of the badge. In that, not only are you thinking about the surface, about if I type and I do a search of my name, ooh, what it comes up if I type in Willie Schaefer. Well, fun fact, there was I believe, governor of Maryland that was William Donald Schaefer. So if I look up William Schaefer, I find him. Or if I type in Willie Schaefer, there's a German wine that comes up with my name. Go fig. So if you do that kind of search and you see yourself, well, that's great. But what if you go deeper? What if you start to look at names, screen names that have been associated at some point with your name? And sometimes I like to pretend, I like to put on my Sherlock Holmes hat and get out my magnifying glass and look around and pretend that I'm an internet sleuth and find out about candidates that I'm, potentially helping hire. And I find things, sometimes you'll find a screen name that is attached to it. And one of the things that always amuses me is one that I came across was, it was a post from a candidate from when they were much younger, I think maybe, 14 years old, where they talked about how they love dolphins. And it's just the silliest thing. But imagine that was something that you said when you were 14, that was just a dumb 14-year-old thing. I know I said dumb things when I was 14. But luckily, the internet wasn't really a big thing when I was 14 to go and put dumb things on the internet with. So always go and check that. I'm not a big sports guy, but you always hear this about athletes. Oh, this tweet came back to haunt them and someone found it from years ago. So go back and look and find, because you might have put something. It might not even be something that you believe, but you were just trying to be cool on the internet and you posted it. Or it could have been something that you believe And I see a comment here. So how do you correct these things to get rid of them? That's what the badge gets into, is that you go through and you dig through and you find these things. And that's the badge will get into how to do the research on some of those things. But it is incredibly important. So yes, cover your bases. Make sure that you have all of your online presence cleaned up. And a tip that a friend of mine gave to me who did some work in politics and wanted to have her social media presence be a little bit more free is just make an alias. Make a fake. If you want to post things that are more long, but you're afraid what people are going to think, make an alias. Invite your friends to, whatever what is it, where you take your street that you grew up on and your middle name and come up with your online presence alias. Now be careful that people could trace that back to you as well. All right, so using technology to practice presentations. So traditional methods, we always think about I'm going to practice my presentation into a mirror. You've probably been told to practice your presentation into a mirror, and you've probably done it. I know I have. But what I'm here to tell you is that is like the way of the dinosaur. That's an old way to be, because when you're practicing into a mirror, you can watch yourself, you can see yourself, and you can look at yourself, but you don't have an ability to watch back and review yourself or listen to yourself. And now this badge, in this section, we're going to focus on listening, because I think a lot of people get caught up in presenting and having presence and those kind of things, and they don't think about how they sound. And this, I keep saying this, but it is true. This is important to me. This is really important to me. And I mentioned this in the badge, but I want to mention it again because I, growing up, had a very thick Southern accent. I grew up in Tennessee. And there's nothing wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having an accent. An accent is a wonderful thing. But I wanted to sound like I was from nowhere. I wanted to be able to go anywhere in the world and work. I grew up in a very small town, and I just desperately wanted to escape. And I knew if I sound like this, it might be hard for me to go out there and get a new job. This is what I used to sound like when I was younger. And if you get me around my friends from Tennessee, man, this accent does come back. But what I did, and of course, this is back in the day, this is a bit before I started using Adobe, is I had a little tape recorder and I just started recording myself. And I retaught myself how to speak. And again, there's nothing wrong with an accent. But if you don't like the way you sound, I hear this all the time. I work with professors, I work with students. And, I hate hearing my voice. I hate seeing myself on camera. I look terrible on camera and I sound horrible. Can't stand to listen to myself. Well, if you feel that way, change it. It's just like, again, writing. If you don't like how you write, you practice, you get better. You listen to your writing. You write it out and then you might say, okay, in your head, right? But when you record yourself, you can listen the same way and hear what you say. So you can make sure that you sound the way you want to sound. You can find those problems. You can find those errors. I like this example too. There was another institution where I worked at where very high level person at the institution, very brilliant. I think they went to, it was like Yale or MIT, one of those schools. But whenever they presented, all I could hear was the fact that they would always say, It got so bad that my coworker and I used to count the numbers. We wouldn't hear anymore what was being said because we were so busy counting. And it was 52 ums during that presentation today. So one of the other things you can do is listen to yourself and find out where you have those weaknesses and put in pauses. I'll be honest with you, you might have noticed this if you're paying close attention. I do a lot of anding, and I say and a lot. And so that's one of those things that I know that I try to practice and I try to work on. And I'm not going to lie to you. This session today, I have recorded twice and practiced just to get comfortable with it, to make sure I feel good with it. I have been presenting now. Again, I've been working in education for so long. I've done so many presentations that some people are like, well, you still practice presentation? I'm like, yes, I want to sound good. I want to sound professional. What one of my former bosses told me, and I'll take with me to the grave, is you look at every single presentation you do like it's a job interview. And you want to come off like you know what you're talking about and that you're comfortable speaking in front of people. And one last little hint about me and the truth about me, I'm a very shy person, I'm a very quiet person, I'm kind of reserved. But when it's time to present and turn that on, man, I put that mask on. And what helps me is recording myself and listening to that. And that's what this badge is going to get into. And with that, we'll be using Adobe Audition, which is another one of those easy to use pieces of software that people just don't use. It's really easy to record yourself and hear yourself and play it back and edit. If you decide you want to edit your voice, you can do that. And honestly, once you get good with Audition, one of the great things about it is it'll allow you to create podcasts. So again, getting your voice out there, putting it on the internet beyond the visual YouTube thing. If you like creating podcasts and you like podcasts, well, why not record it? This is a great way to practice your speaking. Talk about something you like. And this is what I'll say until I'm blue in the face. When you're learning something new, especially like with Adobe, do something you're passionate about. Make a video about, if you're passionate about, I collect the arcade parts, the marquees, the top things. Why don't I make a video series about collecting those just to practice? I like giant robots. This really dumb thing, but why don't I make a podcast about creating or collecting giant robots just to practice? And the last section in the badges here is creating a digital portfolio. And with this, you've all seen the commercials for Wix or Squarespace or whatever it is that people want to use. And you don't have to use any of those. There's a free tool from Adobe called Portfolio. And with this is that one tool that I said would be different for the login. And I'll put the URL here in the chat, portfolio.adobe.com. And it's an online program rather than being in the software package. So you can just go right there. You can put everything together. The badge will go through all the details for it. But what it allows you to do is it allows you to create yourself online, a portfolio of your work, visual, type, audio, anything like that. And I see you use that once. It was great. It is a great tool. I love the tool because it is just so easy to use. And I know I say that a lot, but it's true. You don't have to hire somebody to make a website for you anymore. And again, my freelancer is crying on the inside because I know that by talking about this, I'm losing work. But you don't need to spend that money. You don't need to go and take a bunch of web design classes. I mean, honestly, web design is so different now than it was a couple of years ago. And it continues to be so different that that's a skill set that most people really don't need. But a portfolio skill set where you can go online and design something and say, hey, potential employer, hey, school I want to go to, hey, committee that I want to present for, here is my site. And it will give you the ability to edit the name of it. So for example, you can have myname.myportfolio.com. It doesn't give you a specific URL. You can pay for that. Like if you want to have www.willieisawesome.com. I don't know if that's a real site, so don't go looking it up. You can pay for that, but for free, it will give you a .myportfolio address that is free for you to use to get out there, to promote yourself and let others know about how awesome you are. And this is what we're going to be doing with all of this content for the badge, is it will go onto a portfolio site so you can showcase what you've learned and all the abilities you have, because that is what I believe. That is what I want. That's what I know you'll get from doing this, right? You'll get the ability to show yourself in a new way, to show your skills in a new way, to make yourself digitally relevant to employers, to institutions, and to conferences maybe even that you want to go to. So I hope you guys have enjoyed that. That's a brief overview. Again, the badges will go into greater detail, But I want to share just one more thing real quick with you before we get into the Q&A, and that is my contact information. So I'm going to put these up in the chat as well. If you want help with something, if you have a question about Adobe, william.schaefer@utsa.edu. You can reach out to me there. My LinkedIn. Now, I will say I do break the rules a little bit because I am an artist. My LinkedIn profile picture is an art piece that I made. It's a self-portrait. So I am not using necessarily the same photo skills that I talk about. But you know, it's one of those things. I'm allowed to be a little creative, right, as a creative campus guy. And then my Behance profile, which is Adobe's social media platform. And if you go there, that'll show you some of the artwork that I've created. So if you want to see some of the design and the artwork that I've made, feel free to check that out. Give me a like and follow. No, give that typical social media stuff on there. But that is about everything. So now is our Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, a great time to ask.
Yeah, if you wanted to put it in the chat, or you are welcome to turn on your camera if you'd like, or just vocalize your question without your camera. Totally up to you.
And as I said earlier, you know, I'm a shy person myself. So if you are shy, you know, for one, you don't have to be shy. We're all friends here. And for two, if you are super shy and you want to, or think about it a little bit and then ask later, you can reach out to that email account. Or, you know, if you're like me, I wake up at 3 in the morning with a burning question. You can email me at 3 in the morning with a burning question. Now, I will say I won't get back to you till the next day. I'm not going to answer your question at 3 in the morning, but yeah.
And to help things out, I'm going to turn off the recording, but I'm going to keep this session open then. So maybe if I turn off the recording, that'll help.